Rain hammered against the windows, but the storm inside was louder. My father's voice cut through the thunder. "You've humiliated us for the last time, Tessa." Before I could even speak, my mother grabbed the framed photo of my graduation and smashed it against the wall. The glass shattered across my feet, the same way they just shattered me. "You're the disgrace of this family," she screamed. I looked at my suitcase, already packed. They'd been planning this. Outside, I could see our neighbors watching from across the street, phones raised like vultures. My father opened the front door and pointed out into the storm. "Leave, and don't you ever come back." The thunder swallowed my voice. "Dad, it wasn't my fault." He slammed the door in my face. And that's when I realized something brutal. You don't need strangers to break your heart. Sometimes it's your own family holding the hammer. My name is Tessa Monroe, and that night, I stopped being anyone's daughter. Flashback 2 months earlier. Classroom lights, laughter, the smell of chalk dust. I was happy, a 26-year-old English teacher who loved her job, until one parent decided their son didn't deserve detention. The next morning, I was called into the principal's office. They slid a paper across the desk, an allegation. Inappropriate behavior with a student. My breath stopped. My hands went cold. I said, "That's insane." But they'd already made up their minds. By sunset, my name was on local news. By nightfall, my father was calling me saying, "Do you realize what you've done to our family name?" Not "Are you okay?" Not "Tell me what happened." Just disappointment. That word followed me home like a curse. I tried explaining to my mother the parent was lying. The student admitted he made it up because he was angry about failing. She just stared at me with empty eyes and said, "Where there's smoke, there's fire." That's when I knew. They believed the lie over their own daughter. I spent my first night in a cheap motel that smelled like old cigarettes and despair. I called my mother, voicemail. I texted my dad, delivered, not read. Then I opened my phone and saw it, my mother's Facebook post. "Some people bring darkness wherever they go, praying for clarity." Hundreds of comments. Pity, judgment, gossip. My own parents had just told the world to hate me. I scrolled until I found the photo she used. It was me, smiling at my college graduation. The caption didn't match the face anymore, and I cried until my phone died in my hands. That's when I realized the people who raised me were more worried about saving face than saving me. The motel room felt like a coffin. Every sound from the hallway made me flinch. I kept checking my phone, hoping for an apology that never came. Instead, I watched the comments multiply. People I'd known my whole life agreeing that I was poison. A week later, I went back to my school to collect my things. My classroom, the place I loved, had already been stripped bare. Everything I owned fit into one cardboard box. A janitor I barely knew whispered, "Sorry, Miss Monroe, they said you confessed." My heart dropped. "Confessed?" He nodded, looking down. I found out someone had forged my signature, a fake apology letter that made me look guilty. They didn't even investigate. The board believed the lie because it was easier than admitting they were wrong. I carried that box out under the same hallway banner that once said, "Teacher of the Year," and it felt like walking through a funeral mine. Students I'd taught avoided my eyes. A colleague I considered a friend turned away when I passed. The security guard who usually joked with me just pointed toward the exit. I was erased in 7 days, like I'd never existed at all. That night, I called my father one last time. He answered, silence. For a second, I thought he might say something. "Dad, please, I just need you to believe me." He exhaled, long, heavy. Then I heard the click. He hung up. That sound broke me more than the accusation, more than the firing, more than anything. I sat there in the dark, holding a dead phone, and whispered to myself, "You'll regret this, not by hate, but by success." And that's when I promised myself something sacred. They'd one day watch me from the same screens they used to destroy me. Only this time, the world would see the truth. I wrote it down in my notebook that night, made it real. I will rise from this. They will see me succeed. And when they do, they'll realize what they threw away. I read those words every morning for the next 6 months. They became my prayer, my fuel, my reason to wake up. The walls were thin enough to hear strangers breathing, but at least the rent was cheap. A tiny studio above a laundromat, that became my new life. No framed photos, no warmth. Just one window, one lamp, and a quiet that felt like punishment. During the day, I worked at a used bookstore downtown. The smell of old paper kept me sane. At night, I sat on the floor, writing in a cheap notebook, not stories, just pain spilled in ink. One evening, a woman left behind a journal by accident. Inside were pages of heartbreak, betrayals, apologies never received. She'd written, "If no one listens, at least the page will." I stared at those words for a long time. That night, I opened my laptop and started typing my own story. Not for pity, but for freedom. I didn't know if anyone would read it. I just knew I needed to speak into the void before the silence killed me. I called it The Quiet Daughter. It wasn't fancy, just a blog with gray text on a white background. But each post was a piece of me, the guilt, the rage, the confusion. I wrote about what it felt like to be erased by your own blood. The first comment I got was from a woman named June. I thought I was the only one. Then another. You put my pain into words. I read every comment. With shaking hands, strangers believed me when my parents didn't. For the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. The blog grew slowly. 20 followers became 50. 50 became 200. They weren't huge numbers, but every notification felt like someone saying, "You're not crazy. You're not alone." I started writing twice a week, then every day. The words poured out faster than I could type. Each post felt like removing another piece of glass from my chest. And slowly, painfully, I started breathing again. A year passed. My blog had a small following, but nothing huge, until one afternoon I opened an email that made my heart twist. From cousin Melinda. "Family wedding next weekend. Maybe you could apologize so everyone can move on." I almost deleted it, but some part of me, the wounded part, wanted to see them again, so I went. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't sit near anyone, just stood quietly in the back of the church, watching. When I heard my mother laugh and say, "We don't really talk to Tessa anymore. She's troubled," I froze. They didn't know I was there, didn't know I heard. That night, I poured every word of that pain into my blog post titled, "When Family Chooses Reputation Over Love." By morning, it had 30,000 shares. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emails flooded in. People tagged me in posts I'd never seen. The story had broken free from my small corner of the internet and was spreading like wildfire. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages, emails, notifications, my words had caught fire. News sites quoted me. Influencers reposted me. People from all over the world were tagging The Quiet Daughter. But with the love came the hate. Trolls called me a liar. Someone posted my old school photo with the caption, "Disgrace teacher." And then one message stopped me cold. "Check this article. You were right." A journalist had written about the parent who accused me. He'd just been arrested for falsifying documents in another school case. The lie that destroyed me was unraveling in public. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Just whispered, "Finally." The article detailed how he'd tried the same scheme at 3 different schools, how he'd forged letters before, how his son had confessed under questioning that his father told him what to say. My name was cleared, buried in paragraph 7. No apology, no front page retraction, just a footnote. The next morning, I found it, a small article buried on page 9. "Former teacher cleared after evidence found invalid." That was it. No apology, no justice, just a headline. I sent the link to my parents. No reply. But that night, my mother quietly deleted her old Facebook post, the one calling me darkness. And that's when I realized something powerful. They believed me. They just couldn't admit it. I didn't post anything for a few days. I wanted the silence to sting. Because this time, they were the ones hiding in shame. My blog followers kept growing. Messages poured in from teachers who'd been falsely accused, from children whose parents chose reputation over truth. One woman wrote, "You saved my life tonight. I was going to end it. Your words made me stay." I cried reading that, not from sadness, from purpose. My pain had become someone else's lifeline. That was the moment everything changed, when I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. The email came at 2:13 in the morning. Subject, "Your words could help others." A small publisher had been following The Quiet Daughter. They wanted me to write a book, my story, in full. I almost said no. Writing about my pain was one thing, publishing it, that was different. But the editor wrote something that changed everything. People need to know what silence looks like so they can recognize it in themselves. So I said yes. I opened a blank document and titled it, "The Disgrace's Daughter." And with trembling hands, I started typing. This isn't about revenge, it's about surviving people who were supposed to love me. The advance wasn't huge, $5,000, but it felt like $1 million. I quit the bookstore, rented a slightly better apartment. And for 3 months, I did nothing but write. Every memory, every wound, every moment I wanted to forget. I forced myself to remember it all and put it on the page where it couldn't hurt me anymore. The words wouldn't come. I'd written half the book, then suddenly nothing. Every sentence hurts, every memory bled. I scrolled through old photos, my mother's hand on my shoulder, my father's smile that never reached his eyes. Then I found an old text from her. "We did what's best for the family. You'll understand one day." I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and slid to the floor, screen cracked but still glowing. And somehow that felt symbolic, broken but still working. I sat at my desk and wrote the rest of the chapter in one sitting, shaking, sobbing, unstoppable. That pain became my masterpiece. I wrote about the day they threw me out, about the motel room, about calling them and getting silence. I wrote until my fingers cramped and the sun came up. When I finished, I had 60,000 words. The editor said it was the most honest manuscript she'd ever read. She cried reading it. That's when I knew it would matter. When the book was released, I expected nothing. But the first week, it sold out. Then another. A podcast invited me on for an interview. They asked, "What would you say to your parents if they were listening right now?" I took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for teaching me what love shouldn't feel like." There was silence in the studio. Then the host whispered, "That was powerful." That clip went viral, millions of views. For the first time, people weren't talking about me. They were listening to me, and I knew my parents had seen it because my father's church Facebook page posted, "Forgiveness is a daughter's duty." That was their message to me. Public, manipulative, too late. The comments section exploded. People defended me, called out the hypocrisy. My father's congregation started questioning his leadership. Within a week, 3 families left his church. The cracks were showing, and I hadn't said a single word against them directly. The truth was doing all the work. It was a Sunday afternoon when I heard it, a soft, polite knock. When I opened the door, there they were. My mother smiled like nothing had happened. "Tessa, honey, we thought maybe we could help you manage your image. You've become quite the name." My father stood behind her, eyes scanning my apartment like he owned it. He said, "We can handle the media for you, protect your reputation." I almost laughed. "Protect my reputation?" I asked. "The one you burned alive." My mother's smile cracked. "Tessa, don't be dramatic." I took a deep breath, calm but firm. "You don't get to call me dramatic anymore." Then I closed the door, gently, completely. And for the first time, the silence felt peaceful. Through the door, I heard my mother's voice, higher now, panicked. "Tessa, please, we're your parents, we deserve." I turned the lock. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and kept writing. They knocked for 5 more minutes, then they left, and I smiled. 3 days later, my father went on a local radio show. He called my book fiction, said I was unstable, that my story was exaggerated for fame. For a moment, I felt that old panic again, the fear of being unbelieved. But something was different this time. My readers defended me. People online flooded his church's page with comments. "Even if it's fiction, it's truth. Maybe the real disgrace isn't Tessa." My book sales doubled overnight. I didn't post, didn't respond, just watched the storm unfold quietly, because I finally understood what real power looked like, silence that hurts louder than shouting. The radio station issued an apology for giving him airtime without fact-checking. A local newspaper ran a piece titled, "Pastor's Daughter Speaks Her Truth, Community Responds." The tide had turned, not because I fought back, but because the truth, once spoken clearly enough, defends itself. I didn't need to destroy them. They were doing it to themselves, one desperate lie at a time. The studio lights were blinding. My hands shook under the table, but I smiled anyway. The host leaned in. "Tessa Monroe, the Disgrace's daughter, has changed lives. What would you say if your parents were watching right now?" The audience went silent. I paused, looked straight into the camera. "I forgive them, but I don't owe them my silence." The room erupted. The host's eyes welled with tears. Someone shouted, "Yes, girl," from the crowd. That clip hit social media within hours, 20 million views overnight. Every comment said the same thing. She didn't yell, she didn't curse, she just killed them calmly. And I realized dignity wasn't weakness. It was the sharpest weapon I'd ever owned. My publisher called an hour after the show aired. "Tessa, we're going into a 5th printing. Bookstores can't keep it stocked." I sat in the green room afterward, alone, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the broken girl from the motel. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd survived. Month later, my editor called, screaming with joy. "Tessa, you've been nominated for the National Authors Award." I froze. The same voice that once whispered, "You'll never recover," now whispered, "You just did." Press outlets flooded my inbox. From scandal to success. The disgrace who rewrote her story. And then my parents released a statement. "We are so proud of our daughter's resilience." Resilience. The same people who threw me into the storm now wanted credit for surviving it. I didn't respond. Because some lies collapse faster when you don't touch them. The statement backfired spectacularly. Twitter tore it apart. "They're proud now. Where were they when she needed them?" My father's church attendance dropped by half, donors pulled funding. His radio show was canceled. And still I said nothing. I just kept writing, keep speaking, keep rising. The nomination meant everything, not because of the award itself, but because it proved I hadn't just survived. I'd thrived. And they had to watch. The first book signing in my hometown felt like walking into a ghost story. The same streets that once whispered my shame now had banners with my name. The store overflowed with people. Old teachers, classmates, strangers, even my childhood librarian cried when I signed her book. Halfway through, I saw him, my father, standing in the back of the crowd. Our eyes met. For the first time, I didn't look away. He left before I could speak. When the event ended, I signed one last copy and wrote, "To the girls who were never believed, I see you." I left it on the signing table for free. That copy went viral online the next day. Someone had taken a photo of the inscription. The caption read, "This is what healing looks like." The bookstore owner told me my father had bought a copy, paid cash, didn't ask me to sign it, just took it and left. I wondered if he'd read it, if he'd recognized himself as the villain of my story. If it kept him up at night the way his rejection had kept me up for years. It started with a leaked audio file. A former church volunteer uploaded a recording to Reddit, my parents' voices. My father, "She ruined our image." My mother, "We should have disowned her sooner." It spread like wildfire. Suddenly, people saw the truth without me saying a word. My father's congregation turned on him. His sponsors pulled funding. Commenters called them hypocrites hiding behind religion. Reporters called for my statement. I said nothing. I just posted one sentence on my blog. "The truth speaks loudest when you stop trying to explain it." That post got more views than any before, because silence, again, was my revenge. The recording was devastating. You could hear the contempt in their voices. The calculation. One comment had 50,000 likes. "Imagine calling yourself a Christian while talking about your daughter like this." My father resigned from his church 3 days later. "For personal reasons," the announcement said, but everyone knew why. The daughter he tried to bury had become the truth he couldn't escape. A week later, my agent called. "Tessa, Netflix wants your story." I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. It was surreal. The same story my parents called a disgrace was now worth millions. The producer said, "You'll have full control. Executive producer credit, script approval, it's your voice." I looked at the contract, hands trembling, and I thought of my father's words years ago, "You'll never be more than a failed teacher." I signed the deal quietly and whispered to myself, "Guess I'm teaching the world now." The news broke the next day, headlines everywhere. "Disgrace teacher's story becomes major series." My parents' phone must have been ringing off the hook. Friends asking questions, neighbors gossiping. The whole town watching their shame unfold in real time. I bought my first house that month. 3 bedrooms, big windows, a yard. The kind of place I'd dreamed about as a kid. And when I walked through those doors with the keys in my hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Home. It started with a voicemail. "Sweetheart, your father's church is closing. We just need a place to stay, just for a few weeks." The same woman who once told the whole town I was possessed by shame now called me sweetheart. I didn't reply. The next day, tabloids caught them leaving their mansion, foreclosed. Headlines read, "Monroe family faces financial ruin." The internet called it karma. I called it quiet symmetry. That night, I reread the email from the award committee confirming the date of my acceptance speech. It would be live on national TV. And for the first time, I smiled without guilt. They'd lost everything while trying to protect their reputation. The irony was almost poetic. My mother called 12 more times that week. I never answered. A part of me, the small, wounded part, wanted to help them. But I remembered the day they threw me out, the Facebook post, the radio interview where my father called me a liar. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. And I wasn't going to set myself on fire to keep them warm anymore. The night before the ceremony, my phone rang again. "Tessa, please," my mother sobbed. "Your father's sick. We're being harassed online. We didn't mean," I stopped her. "You meant every word. You just didn't expect consequences." She went silent. Then quietly, "We'll be watching tomorrow." I hung up. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. I looked at the dress hanging in my closet, silver, simple, elegant. I thought about the girl who'd been thrown out in the rain, about the teacher whose name was destroyed, about the daughter who'd been called darkness. Tomorrow, the world would see what I'd become despite them. Not because of them, despite them. I practiced my speech one last time in the mirror. My hands were steady. My voice was strong. I was ready. Not for revenge, not even for vindication, for peace. For the moment when I could finally close this chapter and move forward, free. The dress was silver, simple, and sharp, the opposite of who they said I was. Backstage, the producer whispered, "You're the crowd favorite tonight," when they called my name, and the National Authors Award goes to Tessa Monroe. I froze for half a second. The applause felt like thunder shaking years of silence off me. I walked up, hands trembling, heart pounding. The lights were hot, the cameras blinked red, and somewhere in a quiet living room miles away, my parents were watching. I could feel it. The weight of their eyes through the screen. I thought about all the times I'd imagined this moment. Sometimes I pictured myself angry, defiant. Sometimes broken down in tears, but standing there, holding that award, I felt something unexpected. Calm, complete peace, like every painful step had led exactly here. To this stage, this moment, this truth. I took a breath, looked into the camera, and began to speak. I looked at the audience and said, "When I was 26, I was called a disgrace on my parents' front porch. Tonight, I'm here to thank them." The crowd went still. Because every word meant to break me became the reason I built myself. Every door they slammed taught me to build my own. People rose to their feet, crying, cheering. Somewhere, I imagined my parents sinking deeper into their couch, not because I humiliated them, but because I didn't need to. The truth was enough. That clip trended for a week. Hashtag from disgrace to grace, millions of views, endless tears, and messages from survivors everywhere. My phone exploded with notifications. Interview requests, speaking invitations. People sharing their own stories of family rejection and rising anyway. But the message that mattered most came from June, the first person who'd ever commented on my blog. She wrote, "You gave me permission to tell my truth. Thank you." That's when I knew. This wasn't just my story anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been silenced. Months later, I moved into my new home, sunlight pouring through wide, open windows. A quiet mansion overlooking the city that once pitied me. A knock echoed on the door. My assistant answered. It was my parents. Homeless. Broken. "Tell them," I said softly, "that Tessa Monroe doesn't live here anymore." Because the version they buried no longer existed. As the door closed, I looked at the city below, the same one that once whispered disgrace. Now it whispered legacy. I walked back to my study, passed my award on the shelf, and opened my journal. The final line read, "The best revenge isn't destruction, it's evolution." I closed the book, smiled, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, perfectly free. The girl who was thrown out in the rain had become the woman who built her own shelter. The daughter they called darkness had become the light others followed. And the disgrace, she'd become graceful. That was the real victory, not fame or money or even the award, but the quiet knowledge that I'd survived them, that I'd taken everything they said I'd never be and become it anyway. That was enough. That was everything. Fade out.